Hi, I'm Mana Moini, and you're listening to the Humanity Podcast. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Humanity Podcast. I'm your host, Mana Moini. My guest today is a visionary, a leader, a public speaker, an executive producer, award winner, and successful podcaster. I want to welcome Senior Executive Vice President and Chief Diversity Officer at USBank, Greg Cunningham, to the show. Greg, welcome.
Hi, Mana. Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited. I'm thrilled. I'm actually really thrilled to be here.
I'm thrilled to have you. Did I get everything? I feel like
You got it. There's a lot in there.
You've done a lot.
Yeah, it doesn't always feel that way. There's so much more to do and so much to be done. But I'm proud of the work. All the areas that you talked about. But excited to share the many other places I want to continue to create.
Tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell the listeners what you want them to know about Greg and his story.
Whoa. I guess the most important thing is, I'm just a kid from the neighborhood, and I grew up in Pittsburgh, was born in the housing projects in Pittsburgh. My mom moved us out. I'm the youngest of five. She put me in private school. I went to undergraduate college in Atlanta, which was my first real exposure to, Black culture as sort of something to be really incredibly proud of. And, everybody from the president of the college to the janitor looked like me. It was the first time I had ever had an instructor, a teacher who was Black. I was in college, but graduated from Clark Atlanta University and HBCU in Atlanta, moved to New York City, worked on Wall Street for a couple of years, went back to graduate school in New York, where I met my then girlfriend, now wife. She was a year behind me in grad school. So when I graduated, I started working for a liquor company, Seagram's in New York. And she was recruited to Minneapolis, the Twin Cities, by 3M. So she came here, and we were just dating at the time, but we were starting to get a little bit serious. And I came to visit her here in Minnesota. And I was living, Mana, in a basement apartment in New Jersey, which was about the size of this table. And I came to visit her, and she had a brand new townhouse, a new car, and was paying less than I was paying to live. So I ended up moving here and took many marketing roles, started at Pillsbury, worked at Target for about 17 years in marketing before moving to USBank, where I've been for about the last 10 years.
Wow. And I do want to point out that you are the first African American to serve in a C-suite role at USBank. Is that correct?
True story. These are facts. That was something that I often don't think about it, but I was reminded about it when it actually happened, when our CEO called me and invited me to join the managing committee reporting to him. This was the summer of 2020. And he reminded me of that. And, it's something, I don't know, it's strange because on the one hand, yeah, I'm somewhat proud of it, but on the other hand, it's kind of disconcerting too that it took so long. I mean, our company is 160 years old. And so there's a part of me that goes like, what took us so long? And I just hope, and one of the legacies I hope to leave is that hopefully I'm not the last. I think that's a really important part of what I want to leave the organization with.
What's your favorite part about what you currently do?
My ability to serve other people, to serve communities. I spent a lot of time thinking about my purpose, both in the literal sense and in the figurative sense. And it took me a long time to really understand that my purpose was all about servant leadership and serving other people. And so my purpose statement is all about you creating stories and experiences that actually help inspire the passion and purpose of other people. And that's how I show up. That's how I show up in my work. It's how I show up in the content that I choose to produce or to be involved in. But I think this notion of understanding, one of the first things I understood taking on leadership and leading people was that when you become a leader or others perceive you as leadership, the number one thing that happened for me was understanding it was no longer about me. that when you decide to lead in any capacity, not just in a work environment, you understand that it's bigger than you. It's all about your team. It's all about your community. It's all about whoever you're trying to serve in that moment. So I think being able to have my day job allows me to continue to serve my higher purpose. And I think that's what I enjoy most.
I can tell how passionate you are by the way you talk about it, about what you do, which is amazing.
Yeah.
I have to be honest with you. I brought my A game today.
Come on, let's do it.
Because I know you're a successful podcaster. You had 5 seasons
Yes.
of the Real Good podcast.
Yes.
And, I did listen to a few of the episodes.
Yeah.
And the main, I guess, theme of the podcast was having the conversations and listening, and the importance of talking about things and listening. And when I started my podcast, one of the reasons was because I feel like having conversations doesn't need to be conflict or controversy. It can just be having space for someone else and respecting their opinion. You don't necessarily have to agree, but we're doing a disservice to society by not having the conversations. Yeah. And I wonder if you can just share your opinion on that.
You know what that is? That's compassion and that's empathy. I think compassion and empathy is all about seeking to understand. It doesn't mean that we agree. Like, I don't really even care if people, like when I talk about what I do or I share a point of view, like it's not important to me that we agree. It's not even important to me that you understand, but it's important that you want to. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like I think that's what empathy is all about. Like I don't have to agree with your point of view, but having empathy means that I'm listening with the objective of understanding. Like we all have engaged in conversations with somebody and their only objective is to make a point. Yeah. I hate that.
Which is where the listening comes in.
Like your objective should always be about seeking to understand, and certainly sharing your point of view is important. But I also think the most important part of any dialogue is your willingness and your intentionality around truly listening and listening with the goal of understanding. Right. That's how I feel about it.
One of the things that you talked about on another podcast that I listened to, Conversations from the Heart. It's a few years old, but I think this sounds like something that I also believe in. You said growth comes from a place of discomfort.
Yeah.
Adversity helps us grow. Was there ever a point of, I'm sure there was, but one point of adversity that really stands out to you in your life?
Seminal moment in my life. I was 5 years old, and this is the late 60s, and Dr. King was just assassinated. And similar to George Floyd's murder, at that time, urban cities, urban environments exploded with civil unrest, and rightfully so. And, when my dad was a small business owner in Pittsburgh, he owned a butcher shop in the primarily black neighborhood in Pittsburgh. And when Dr. King was assassinated, the streets really just sort of exploded. And my dad's butcher shop was looted and burned. And, I just remember so vividly, what was happening, and my dad sort of sleeping but not coming home and sleeping in the butcher shop to protect it, and like all of that stuff. And then the very next summer he died. He died from a brain aneurysm caused by stress and anxiety and all of the things, right? And that was the seminal moment for me. So times of unrest and adversity are not, the trauma that comes with that is something that, unfortunately, I'm very familiar with because it was what I knew from a child. And like, how do you, push past that and overcome that? So what adversity has always brought for me, and I just recently, less than 2 weeks ago, lost my oldest sister very tragically. But what adversity has always done for me is brought clarity. Like it's brought clarity of purpose, my relationships, and all of that. And I think if you can fuel it in the most positive way and sort of use your soul energy to align that with your personality, that's what gives me empowerment. Like when I can take the essence of my soul and who I am and who I want to be as a person and align that with my personality, that's when I feel the most in control. That's when I feel like I make the best decisions. That's when I feel like I have the most clarity about my life and how I want to move forward.
So knowing what you know now, what would you tell that 5-year-old little boy?
You're enough. You're going to be okay. Continue to dream. For me, it was the result of that in many ways sort of forced me to come inward, is to really reflect inward. And I spent a lot of time as a kid just sort of alone, like reading books and reading, like my mom had this book cabinet that had all of these books that were left over from the previous homeowner. And it was stuff like Robin Hood and Moby Dick and like all these like what people would consider at the time like classic novels, right? And I would just read them because they were there, right? But what it allowed me to do was to actually dream. And I think, not to take this too far, but that's where, education and reading and helping kids formulate an imagination becomes so important, because I dreamed of being in a different place. I dreamed of being able to achieve things outside of just, the blocks in my neighborhood, and understanding that there's a big world out there. And so, for me, this notion of dreaming and formulating an imagination of what's possible and understanding possibilities, all of that was sort of formulated out of this trauma that happened very early in my life.
I think, as a society, sometimes we don't feel like we can dream, because sometimes dreaming isn't an immediate result, right? There's a lot of work that goes into that. And so I think that's really beautiful, the whole concept of like, keep dreaming. You're never too old. It's never too late. What would you tell someone who isn't where they want to be right now in their life? They either have a goal that they haven't accomplished, or they feel like, what's my purpose? I don't know what to do. I'm too old. Like, how do you motivate those people to keep going?
By not focusing on what you don't have, and focus on what you do have. What I've found to be so vitally important is to maintain an extremely positive mindset around whatever you have at your disposal. Use that. Like, use the things that are currently in your toolbox to get where you want to go. Like, it's what we say to ourselves about ourselves that prevents us from achieving what we want to achieve. Because usually what we say to ourselves is, oh, I don't have those skills, or I don't have enough money. I don't know how to run a business. I don't know how to do that. I don't have this. I'm not. And we don't always say it out loud. We just say it in our inner voice. We say it to ourselves. And so we use it as a way to cop out from trying, because what is a much more courageous path is to say, I'm going to try. And I just, core to my being is having courage and bravery. You have to have some courage. Is the most important of all the virtues. You can't demonstrate with any consistency any of the other virtues without courage. Like, think about it. Mm-hmm. Like, you have to have courage in order to demonstrate anything in life that will benefit you or create some sort of reward in your life. And so find the courage within yourself to try, and do not be afraid to fail, and don't worry about what other people are saying. I choose to live my life from the inside out. And too often, and too many people who feel the way that you just described live their life from the outside in. Mm-hmm. And I guarantee you that's not a recipe for success.
I think you hit it right on the nose. Is we're not very kind to ourselves.
No.
Like, as a human race, right? And one of the focuses of this season is how do I be kinder to myself so that I can give more to the people in my life, right?
Yeah.
And I love what you said about courage, because I think the number one thing that negates courage is fear.
Yes.
Which fear is like,
it's the other side
rampant,
of it,
right? So.
And giving ourselves some grace to understand, like, you're right. I mean, fear it's the narrative of the day. Like, we are bombarded with messages and experiences that are aimed to do just that, to create fear and create division amongst us. And so what I would recommend, and something that I try to be very intentional about is turning off, or being really diligent about what are my inputs. Like, turn off social media, like turn off the TV, like seek to find those things that don't create fear, because it's those inputs that we're receiving that create the fear, even if it's inputs that are just validating what you already believe.
Yeah.
Like, I tend to turn that stuff off. Like, I'm on this whole thing right now. Like, I haven't been on social media in a couple of weeks now. Like, just because, after my sister passed away, like, I just needed to like turn it all off, because I need to turn that switch off for myself, because I need clarity, and I need to be able to think without having all these inputs, even if it's just things that validate how I already think. I want to challenge myself that, am I thinking about it the right way? Maybe I need to read some different things. Maybe I need to challenge the way I've thought about it. Maybe I need to challenge my worldview. And through this clarity that I'm, always seeking, how does that, sort of allow me to become a better person, a kinder person, kinder to not only other people, but kinder to myself, as you've already said. And I don't know. I think we just, we have to stop relying for validation from places outside of who we are and what we intuitively know. Like, your instincts will tell you, it will be your GPS if you choose to acknowledge it. But we tend to try to turn it off and like do what we think other people want us to do, or what's going to validate us through other people.
Yeah. The you want everybody to like you, the
Yeah.
people pleasing.
I'm cool. I got a lot of followers. I got, you know what I mean? Like, it's
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
that need for like constant validation. Like, how many
Yes.
likes did I get for that last picture I put? Like, it's just ridiculous.
And I think that's actually a great segue into what I wanted to ask you about, which is, when you're so focused on validation, you're not really living your authentic
No.
being yourself. You seem like you're a very authentic leader. You live your life authentically. You embrace, your life. Why is it important?
I believe that we're here for a bigger purpose than we probably choose to admit. And, as I said earlier, if you are really true to your soul, like, I believe in energy, and I believe in like the transference of energy, and like the energy I get from environment and people, and all of that is absolutely critical. And if you are in tune with truly what's in your soul, what truly is your intuition, what truly are your instincts, you will show up authentically no matter what room you're in, because you will have like your lived experience all contribute to that. And your lived experience actually is your superpower. I remember when I first started my career in corporate America, like, I would always compare myself to, I would come in to these companies, and you'd be in a cohort of people, right? And there's like 10 of you, and like one person would get, a cool job right away, like in the first 6 months or something. You're like, oh man, like, Mana got that job on it. She's like really smart and cool. And like, I wonder when it's going to be my turn. Like, I would always sort of be comparing myself to other people. And then I realized, like, it wasn't whether I was as smart or as talented as the other person, but it was when I figured out how I was smart and how I was talented that I felt liberated. Like, I started to feel like, oh my God, like, I don't need to be ashamed to say I grew up in the housing projects of Pittsburgh, or I went to an HBCU and my colleague went to Harvard. Like, I'm just as smart as that person. It's just, I'm smart differently, and I'm talented differently. And the stuff that I'm good at, they're not good at. And I'm going to use that to my advantage. Mm-hmm. And, you have to put yourself in a position where you can truly soar with your strengths. Like, if you're in an environment who doesn't see you, you're in an environment who doesn't value what you're good at, then you're in the wrong environment. Then right. You actually have to change your environment and position yourself so that all those things that you bring that are so valuable can be leveraged. And that's what gives me again, courage to be authentic, because I know what I bring to the table, and I know what it's worth, and I know how valuable it is. And if I'm in a room that doesn't value it, then I just go to a different room.
There's a school of thought that says every time you're not authentic to yourself, it's a form of abandoning yourself. Right? Because you're kind of
Completely.
caving to what others want of you or what's more comfortable to others. So I've always found that fascinating. You talked a lot just now about feeling seen.
Hmm.
As a leader, what have you found makes people feel seen?
Let me start by saying when I talk about being seen, I also think it's important that you first see yourself. Like I, yes, it's critical for me to feel, and I think it's critical need of all of us to feel seen. But that starts with actually seeing yourself. And I think as a leader, I found it really important to see myself in other people and allow other people to see themselves in me. And I think that is, this notion of honest and servant leadership requires a certain amount of vulnerability. Like the best leaders are really, really vulnerable because what they do is they understand as a leader, you're hardwired to always feel like you have the answer. Like when you're in a leadership position, you're like, I need to be the smartest person in this room.
I need to be right.
I need to be right. And that's exactly what people don't want from you. Is because, first of all, you're not the smartest person in the room. Again, it's about how you're smart, not whether you're smart or not. But the best leaders also know how to show up as the student, not always as the teacher. Like leaders always want to show up as the teacher, but the leaders that also can show up as a student and say, I don't know, tell me more. Like they're willing to ask questions. The best leaders ask the most questions because they understand that leadership is a process of learning and it's a process of curiosity and it's seeking understanding so that you can make a more informed decision. And so I've always found it, really important that people see themselves in me and that by being the student, sometimes it's disarming. Like they don't feel, and I tell my team this all the time, I don't want to be anybody's boss. Like we got too many people who want to be the boss and not enough people who want to be the coach. I was like, don't call me your boss. I'm your coach. Like it's not into like the hierarchy thing is not important to me. Like I understand we have to have hierarchy, but I'm a person, like I'm a human soul. Like I'm a artist in many ways. And I operate better in environments that are they're less hierarchical and they're more matrixed and fluid. And, it's not about an organization for me. For me, I'm better at an organism, which functions through relationships. And in a big company like the one I work with, you have to have organizational structure and hierarchy is critical to govern, right? But within my micro environments that I try to create more organisms that are much more fluid, that operate through relationships, that operate through getting the best out of every single person. And all of that to me is the answer to the question that you asked around being seen. It's like people need to feel like there's a part of you that they relate to in a way that allows them to be the best of who they are in that environment.
Would you almost say in order to feel seen, one has to feel heard?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And heard is not just in the literal sense of being heard. Heard meaning, I'm trying to make a point or I'm trying to express a point to the team vocally. Heard also means that there are the conditions that it's that sense of belonging. Like I belong here. Like this is a culture where I feel like, not everybody, the introvert in the room is not going to speak up all the time. You know what I mean? But for them to feel heard, it needs to feel like an environment. If I want to, I can, but I might also come to you after the meeting because I might want to have that conversation with you privately because that's just how I function. And so feeling heard is about, is the culture conducive to me being able to express myself and however I choose to do that.
Do you think that in the last couple of years specifically, the traits that we value in people, you mentioned empathy earlier on in our conversation. Do you think the traits that we value in people have changed? Because I remember a time when you were an empath, you were too sensitive, especially in corporate America.
Yeah.
But for me personally, my experience the last couple of years is because everything was shut down and people felt so disconnected. A lot of people are moving towards more of those soft skills as traits that they are looking for or identify with. Would you tend to agree with that?
I think we will always value um, people who are, empathetic, and people who demonstrate compassion and honesty and trust. We don't see it often enough now, or it doesn't get rewarded. Maybe to the point that you're making, I don't think we reward it enough because everything is so performative and has been sensationalized because we need to get clicks and I need likes and I need, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like
impressions.
and I need impressions and I need
Engagement.
yeah, and compassion and empathy is not driving engagement. Like it's not driving, that's not what people want to, like they want the sensational. And I think what I'm trying to do certainly through my work at the bank, is to bring back a little bit of this, you know, like how do we get people to understand that you can be the successful, business person who, brings all of what that means, but at the same time, do some good out here. Like you can do well and do good at the same time. Like it's a mantra and a big part of the work that me and my team are doing at the bank. It's like they're not separate things. Like doing well and doing good at the same time is really important. And I want to bring back this notion of rewarding not only people but organizations who understand that and understand that we have a bigger responsibility than just driving profits, or whether that be for the organization or for ourselves. But we all have a bigger responsibility to something other than ourselves. My job, Mana, is not just to do my job. My job is also to contribute to something bigger, to contribute to a community called USBank, to contribute to a region called the Twin Cities, to contribute to a nation, which is why I think conversations like this need to have a bigger platform, because we have to challenge the way we've been thinking about, who gets recognized and what gets recognized and rewarded, and what values do we truly sort of stand up as best practices nowadays. And I think we'll keep chipping away at it.
What you just said reminds me of something I just saw on Instagram, of all places. And it was a reel, and it said, "What is your definition of wealth?" And in this particular reel, it was, mine is being able to wake up in the morning and have a cup of coffee. In the case that you were just explaining, wealth to you or someone else might be giving back, versus for some people, wealth just might be straight up the paycheck.
Yeah.
So I think the concept of like, what does wealth in life mean to you is just such a thing to study, because
Wealth
it tells
and
you a
health.
lot about people. Yeah, wealth and health.
Wealth and health, and health to me means everything from, I love what you shared of just being able to wake up, like that's a blessing, and that's, there's incredible value in that. But to me, it's additionally, it's having healthy relationships, having, a healthy community around me, having, physical health. It's all of those things, because I think all of those things, I'm reading, if you ever read Gary Zukav's Seed of the Soul, it's a really interesting book. And the book sort of explores part of what I was talking about around soul energy and putting positivity. It talks about karma and stuff like that. But karma is actually something very different than I think how we, have historically thought about it. The reason it is such a profound thing for me is because we are what we put out in the world, right? Like you are that, and every single one of us as individuals, has a unique role in sort of contributing positivity, or not, but hopefully positivity into the world. And I think we underestimate the role that each one of us can play as individuals, to just make things better for everyone. And to me, that's wealth. Wealth is like, to your point, waking up in the morning and saying, you know what, I'm going to do something good today. And yes, we're going to have bad days. You're going to have bad days along the way. But if you can approach every day with the mindset of, how do I make it better, not only for myself, but make it better for others? I guarantee you will feel wealth in your life and you'll feel health in your life.
So, to ask you a follow up to what you just said, how do you recommend, or how do you see a single individual making a big impact throughout their day on just others in terms of positivity? Like, what's one thing that we can all do every day to spread some like love into the world?
Think of how many people you touch every day, right? Either directly or indirectly. Funny story, I was walking earlier, I was walking into the office and I was passing, this woman who she had just gotten off the bus and right in front of the USBank building. And, it was pretty early this morning. And I just sort of smiled at her and was like, hey, good morning, and she just kind of looked at me like, why are you like, I don't know you.
Yeah.
Like,
What do you want? Yeah.
Yeah, like,
Yeah.
I don't know you. Like, why are you? But I feel like but I felt better. But I feel like those interactions, like whatever she's going through, my interpretation was like she's in some sort of pain or she's mad about something or she doesn't want to be going to wherever she's going. But in that one instance, in that one moment, like if I could offer her a gesture of humanity, an acknowledgement, that's a good thing. That's a good thing. Because whatever she has to deal with after that, I can't necessarily help with that. But in that moment, I can offer her a moment of humanity and kindness, which might make her, maybe it helped her for the rest of the day. Maybe she thought differently about what was about to happen or what happened before she had that interaction. And I think all of us can sort of just not let those moments be flybys, like not let each interaction we have with somebody, be a moment that is disposable, that, we'll take every opportunity to just sort of spread something, that is kindness in every, it's the barista at the store. It's the person where, I love people who love their job. I don't care what your job. Like, I love people.
It just makes you happy.
It does.
Around them. Yes.
When you see
Yes.
somebody, even the person at the checkout, whatever but somebody who's like doing their job with joy, like you just want to be like, thank you. Like I just love seeing that.
Same.
Like I think each one of us can help contribute to that by acknowledging people, who are doing that. Like acknowledge the person at the checkout who's doing their job with joy, whatever it is. Just say, hey, like I really appreciate that interaction, and thank you. Have a great day. I'd like to do that. Like not to be too idealistic or hokey about it. Like I have bad days too, and I'm like, but I try to, when I see somebody who's doing something that most of us take for granted and they're doing it with joy, like just acknowledge it.
The story you shared about the woman at the bus stop today.
Yeah.
I think that's a telling of where we're at in our society. I think if more of us were doing that, it wouldn't be so shocking to receive a smile or whatever it might be. And it's almost like rewiring what people are used to. And so it's going to take a while and it's going to take more people doing it. But that's not the first time I've heard, someone tell me a story where it's like, hey, I smiled at someone at the grocery store and they like frowned. It's because it doesn't happen often enough. And sometimes we're like, go, and in our own little silos.
Yeah.
To where that's probably why we're just trying to get to the next place and we're not taking the time to just make sure we're exchanging pleasantries throughout the day,
And we don't trust each other anymore.
I know.
It's all about like when you meet somebody for the first time, like what's the first thing that, like maybe not outwardly, but inwardly, the first thing you're thinking about is, do I trust this person? Like you're kind of like, like you look at them and like before you like open up and become vulnerable, you want some sort of indication that I can trust this person.
So can I take that a step further?
Please.
Maybe it's when somebody gives you something.
Yeah.
Whether it's a compliment or
Correct.
a water.
Yes.
Our society, we've almost been conditioned to they want something back.
Correct.
And so that's where I think that trust piece you're talking about is coming into play, because it's like, well, why are you smiling at me and saying something nice?
Yeah. Don't trust the other person. Like that's what we are being conditioned to think. It's like you can't trust your neighbor. You can't trust each other. Like that person is giving you water. You better make them drink from it first. Don't drink that. Like I have people like, you ever have like a potluck at work and I have people like, I don't do that. I don't drink, but I don't eat other people's food. Like, I'm like, yeah, I guess that's a good point. Maybe I shouldn't be eating like, Barbara's, hot dish. I don't know, but there's
That's funny.
There's something about me that says I just want to have a gesture towards, but
Yeah.
I want to eat the potluck
Yeah.
thing, like just to, and I think we've got to, each of us need to use whatever platforms. And I have a big platform. I work for the 5th largest bank in the country. I have a big platform. And I want to use the platform to do whatever I can. Again, back to my purpose is to create experiences and stories that help people find their passion and purpose. And I want to continue to use that and use the bank as a vessel to help improve communities, to help close gaps in wealth. But to also, I think a big part of it is actually closing this trust gap that has just continued to widen in our culture. And culture is a whole nother thing that I would love to get into at some point, because I think culture is like the operating system of like, how we live our lives. And the more that we can come together through culture, it's a really important and powerful way to bring communities together through like-mindedness, right? Like you ever meet, like, do you drive a Tesla or anything like that?
I've been in a Tesla, but
do you know Tesla drivers, like they just all see the world the same way.
Yeah.
Like it's like it's not even about the car. No, seriously. It's not even about the car. It's about how they see the world.
Yep.
It's like they see the world in the same way. And I think like that's culture. Like people are coming together around shared beliefs and shared values. It's less about race and the things that we used to sort of segment people by. And it's more about like, how do you see the world? Because you can't look at people nowadays. Like you can't look at people's race and determine what drives them. Like my son is 6'2", 190 pounds, was a student athlete all the way through college. Like if he walked in here right now, you'd be like, oh, like he clearly was athletic and maybe played football or baseball. My kid played hockey. He's a black kid, like, because he grew up in Minnesota. Like he was LeBron Gretzky. You know what I mean? Like he just, like you can't, I'm glad you got that joke. Like, yeah.
I am too, because I don't always know my sports stuff. But okay, I am too.
That's my only sports reference today. It's my only sports reference today. But my point in bringing that up is like you can't look at this younger generation. Like you can't look at sort of their racial makeup and determine like how are they going to make decisions and how they're going to live their lives culturally, because they're sort of coming together through lots of different means, and most of it is through these sort of cultural communities that are forming around shared beliefs and shared value.
So you're mentioning cultures, but do you think that as humanity, are we more alike than we are different?
Of course we're more alike. Like you just, race is a man-made construct, as we all know. And, we all want the same things. We all want safety and security for our family. We all want to prosper so that we can, live in healthy communities. We all want the same thing. How we get there and, the way that we've sort of constructed narratives and brought politics and religion and all these other things into it, has been a way to make us believe that we all want different things. But I believe in general, as human beings, we all want the same things. And I think we're wired from the time we're a child to seek the best of each other. Like if you put two kids in a room, you put two small kids in a room, they don't see race, they don't see.
I know, it's beautiful.
Yeah, like they're just like the division has been taught. Like we've been taught to fear each other. And so absolutely, we all want the same things. And I think we have to find ways, and this is why I think what you're doing and you providing a platform to myself and our ability to tell stories create proximity. Like you talked about the film, and I'm very proud of the film we produced called Translators, and it's about these kids who were very young, but it's about these kids who translate for their parents Their parents are recent immigrants, and they translate everything from medical information, financial information, like really important stuff. And there's a scene in the movie, it's one of the young girls, her name was Hadi. And there's a scene in the movie where her younger sister has to have some surgery. She's getting like tubes in her ears or something. And her mom is asking her to translate some of the documents from the doctors. And Hadi's like she's touching her head, and she's like, you could feel the weight of the responsibility that she's feeling. And she's like, I just don't want to get it wrong. Like, I don't want to say the wrong thing. And this girl's like 13 years old. And, through that story, and there's like 11 million kids in this country who translate for their parents. But in a certain sense, we're all translators. Like, we all translate for somebody. Like, we translate. My mom's 94 years old. Like, I got to translate how to send a text. Like, we all translate for somebody in our lives. But when you see the film, you start to understand, and you start to have empathy and understanding. And it doesn't matter that these kids speak Spanish. You start to understand the humanity of what they're going through, and you empathize, and you see yourselves in them. And I think our ability to share stories is what brings proximity, and that creates, I think, shared humanity.
And almost like takes down defenses too, right?
Yeah.
When I share a story with you or vice versa, it's almost that comfort level increases, and the barriers come down. Because I do think as a race, human race, we're a little defensive, kind of going back to the trust thing, right?
Yeah, we don't understand.
Our walls are up naturally.
And we don't have enough awareness around, like, as Dr. King would say, like the shared, like our shared reality, like our mutual existence and the shared reality that we all have. The reality is we're all here together.
Yeah.
Like our physical existence is something that we share. And, once you sort of understand that your existence and your, what affects you indirectly, what affects you directly affects me indirectly, that's the shared notion of the shared reality. Like, none of us are in this place and space, independent of one another. We all sort of have a responsibility and I think, unique shared existence together.
Well said. Before we wrap up,
yes,
and it took me the whole conversation to get here, even though you are the Chief Diversity Officer at USBank. Diversity exists.
Mm-hmm.
Why does it feel like we are still proving that it exists, or having the conversation around diversity and what it means, why it's important? Like, why are we still having that conversation, you think?
I don't think we're having a conversation about whether it exists or not. I think the conversation we're having is, what's the value of it? Is it valued? Or the tension is more about the equity side of it. I think there's no one who I shouldn't say no one. There's, I guess, few people who would deny that the facts are what the facts are. We are a diverse nation. We are a diverse world, to carry it that far. But I think there are very few people who would not acknowledge the diversity. I think there's a strong, unfortunately, politicized debate about whether that's a good thing or not, and whether that's valuable. I fundamentally have always believed that the strength of our nation has always been our diversity. That's what's made the United States of America so incredibly unique, and the greatest country on the face of the earth, from my perspective. And I think what organizations are starting to understand is that the real business case for diversity, Mana, has always been that it's better for business, that it actually improves innovation, it actually improves the growth of the business, because you're actually thinking about the market in the most holistic way. Like, you're actually sort of seeking to take advantage of the opportunities in the market, and you're not leaving potential consumers by the wayside by not being relevant to them. That's what the smart companies are doing. There are other folks who are sort of caught up in this debate about what DEI is and who it's for, and like we're not getting caught up in that. Like I want to keep us focused on, communities that are vibrant are good for business. When you have wealth disparities in this country, that's bad for everybody. Like the wealth disparities in this country, particularly the racial wealth disparities, it's a drag on the U.S. economy as a whole. It's a drag on every single American household. So everybody should care about it. Like everybody should want to see these wealth disparities go away because communities that are suffering are bad for everybody. And so I think, putting the focus back on what the benefit of diversity is I think the real challenge going forward.
Thank you for breaking that down. And I think to your earlier point, less about whether diversity exists or not, but the importance of it to the health of our nation, our futures, etc. I saw somewhere that you had said that you think that wealth disparities are driving the majority of our problems here in the United States, and you just listed many of them.
Yeah.
But I don't know if there's anything additional you want to speak to in terms of that.
It affects everything. Wealth disparities affect everything. It affects opportunities. It affects people's ability to gain access to quality health care, quality education, a quality way of life. And it's not just because I'm in banking, but I just think poverty is at the root cause of so many of the problems that we have. And it drives that fear that we talked about earlier. It drives division between people, because when people are suffering, they're looking for somebody to blame. And I think, if we can eradicate, poverty in all forms, and not just in communities of color, but, in rural communities and everywhere. And I just fundamentally believe that the work of diversity, equity, and inclusion is about, it's not about how you cut the pie thinner. It's like, how do you bake a bigger pie? Like, let's grow it for everybody. Because when, I like to say, when we all win, we all win. Like how about we all do better? And that is, I think that's admittedly incredibly idealistic, but I also think it's very aspirational in terms of how businesses need to think about the opportunity that is in front of us. You can do well and do good at the same time. And I think that's what the businesses who are going to be successful in the future understand, that yes, businesses are operate to make a profit, but through that mandate, to create shareholder value, we can create value for all of our constituents, and those constituents include, at the most basic level, it includes the employees and the people who work in your organization, because you're helping them create a better lives for themselves and their family. It's also doing right by customers and making sure that people are getting the products and services that they need to live a better life. And the third component of that is communities, like making sure that communities are better as a result of you being there, that we see these communities developing small businesses, and small businesses are creating jobs. And all of those things, I think, are, so important to this notion of what diversity brings. It's not about creating favor for anyone. It's actually making sure that we have parity, and that we have parity of opportunity.
You know what makes me nervous is when we are in, call it whatever, recessionary times, economic turmoil. I feel like the first thing that normally goes is the service part of an organization. People start donating less to nonprofits. Like, that's the stuff where that kind of aspirational notion, I think, kind of is tougher to reach in times like this.
But what's not tougher is, even in the times of economic times that are more difficult, and you had talked about organizations who maybe pull back on their philanthropy, but everybody wants to continue to do well. Like, everybody wants to continue to see their business grow. They want to grow their business. And so if we keep the focus on like, how do we create, there is no separation, in my opinion, Mana, between social justice and economic justice. They're inseparable twins. You can't have one without the other. And so if you can do a whole lot of good when your business is doing well. Mm-hmm. And so no matter what the economic conditions are, yes, as a business, you have to make tough decisions and you've got to think through. But this notion of understanding that in order to create a better society, I have to do better as a business. Like and those of us that are fighting for social justice and all of that have to understand that if these businesses don't do well, then they can't contribute. And so let's understand that those two things cannot be separated. The only way that we can have social justice is to have economic justice, and we have to have access to capital for our small businesses. And we have to be able to, ensure that people have access to mortgage loans so that people can buy homes. We know home ownership is the number one way that wealth gets transferred in this country. It's been that way since that's what the Homestead Act was all about. Like, people understood, like, owning land is like, that's how you're going to build wealth. So, like, that's why we're focused on those things as a bank. Like, we're going to focus on what are the economic conditions that we can help improve. Because if we focus on that, that's how a bank can actually make a difference. And hopefully those that are in healthcare will focus on that. Like, let's all do what we do really well. Like, everybody just do your job. Like, do your job really well. And if we all sort of, contribute in ways that are singular and focused and intentional, I think that's how we'll make the bigger change, is really focusing on our lane. And ours just happens to be, and my beliefs just happens to be, in order to see any of these conditions change, we have to make things better economically for people.
I think that was really insightful. Thank you for sharing that.
I don't know. It's just how I feel.
I think you're right. And I think it's always important to talk about what's obviously going on in our country, which is the wealth disparity. So Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
As you know, this season is about being kind to yourself. I want us to leave the listeners with one last question, which is, how do you show yourself kindness in your life, but particularly the days that are tough?
Probably the best answer to that question is I'm uncompromising about how and where I spend my time and who I allow to have it.
Can't get back time.
Full stop. I claim my time, and I claim give myself permission to say no. And I give myself the permission because I need it. Like, I'm a closet introvert, honestly. I really, at my core, I'm an introvert. Like, I need alone time. I need, there are times where, and it drives my wife crazy sometimes because she's a total extrovert. But there are times where I'll just, like, go in my den and, like, close my doors and, like, just be. But I need that time. Like, I need that time to recharge. But I'm uncompromising about my time, and it doesn't always make me friends, but I've found it a lot easier to say no to things that don't fill my cup up. And so time, I think, is what I do for myself, is give myself time to do the things that I enjoy, and that restore me.
Prioritizing yourself is probably the utmost
Yes, that's
kindness,
a better way of saying it, actually.
Utmost kindness you can show yourself.
Yes.
And we don't do enough of that. I'm so glad that you said yes and not no to coming on this podcast. It's such an honor to have you. I really enjoyed this conversation.
It's an honor to be here. Thanks for having me. I love what you're doing, and we should all thank you for what you're doing. And these conversations are so important. So thank you for what you do for all of us. And it was a thrill to be here.